Well, it's a nice fish for Alan, Mike.
Yeah, I wish it was one of mine.
It's been 20 years since you first wrote Hooked on Bass with Alan.
Must be that now, I suppose, yeah.
How did the idea come about?
Well, we'd been writing letters to each other for a month or two, and we'd written so much that we decided there was a book there, and so we just really tagged them all together, and there it was.
Well, it's certainly been a successful concept. I think Hooked on Bass has been widely regarded as the bass angler's Bible.
Yeah, it has, but I think it's time it was updated now, though. Really.
Well, in fact, it has been reprinted, hasn't it, with updated
yes.
sections. Yeah. And like the film that we made several years after the book was published, perhaps now's the time to update the film with the book.
Yeah, that's right.
And
I mean, there's a lot of changes in the 10 years since we made that first film.
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, sure. Well, we try to incorporate a few of those in the film that we're producing now. So anyway, let's get on with the job in hand, eh?
Absolutely. Well, as you can see, it's a lovely sunny day, and I'm fishing with the rocks about a mile west of Plymouth. Since we made the last bass fishing video, which is some years ago now, there have been some real innovations in equipment, and one of the major changes has been the introduction of braided lines. Now, these braids are different from nylon. Nylon has a lot of stretch in it, and braids have got virtually none. And the lack of stretch gives you a number of advantages. Firstly, you can feel every movement of the lure on the end of the line. And secondly, and perhaps most important, when a fish does take, the hooks are pulled into its mouth with no stretch at all, no give. Very good for hooking fish. There are problems about using this line. It's extremely thin, which allows much longer casts, but it's so thin and soft that you have to be careful not to get tangles, and beginners often have problems with knots and tangles in the line. So what you do, firstly, don't overfill the spool. You can afford to be anything up to 1/8 of an inch under the lip of the spool. A bit different to nylon, where you've got to fill the spool almost to the limb to get maximum casting distance. The second thing is, particularly when you're casting, when you bring the bail arm over, bring it over with your hand. And always check that you've got no loops when the bail arm comes over. I bring the bail arm over manually now every time. I don't wind the handle to get the reel into action. So knock the bail arm over with your hand and make certain as you do that there are no coils of line overlapping the edge of the spool like this. Otherwise, next time you cast, surely it'll come off with a knot, and knots in this fine soft braid are very difficult to unpick. There is one other small disadvantage with this stuff. Essentially, these braids are made of lots of very thin fibres, a bit like dental floss. They're fantastically strong. This is 30-pound braid. It's about the thickness of 6-pound nylon. However, if it rubs against rocks or sharp surfaces when the line is tight, it's quite liable to snap. Under normal pulling pressure of a fish, it's virtually impossible to break, so you've got to be very careful not to get your fingers tangled in it, in fact. But if it pulls tight over rocks, it will sometimes go with very little warning. Just one other thing worth mentioning with this stuff, you'll notice that I've actually attached the braid to the lure with a piece of nylon. Now that's not for any particular reason, doesn't make it less visible to the fish, I don't think, or anything like that. However, if the lure was to fold back in the cast onto the nylon, it doesn't get tangled up in it. If it folds back directly onto the braid, if you've got the braid tied directly to the lure, there's a possibility that the hook will go through between the fine strands and actually damage the line itself. So when I'm fishing, I normally just put a short length of nylon between the braid and the lure. You need a special knot really, or not the usual nylon knots, to attach the braid to the nylon. I'll loop the nylon first of all with a sort of figure of 8 knot on it to keep the loop in, and then the braid's attached to that loop with a Albright knot, which is about 12 turns of braid round the loop, and it pulls up tight, and it will, in fact it's as strong as anything. That's been in there for several days now and it shows no signs of weakness at all. Very neat knot, no problem. You don't need to cut the braid off absolutely at the last. You can leave 1/4 inch in there and it won't make any difference. It's so soft it just lies down, nothing. And the other end you can use any normal nylon knot to attach the lure. These days, in fact, you see I favour just an on-slip loop knot at the head of the lure. It's a good secure knot, and it actually doesn't need any clips or swivels or anything like that, so it's cheap, and that's something that really appeals to me. You notice that this stuff I'm using, this is 30-pound break-in strain. It's incredibly thin, very soft, very flexible, casts beautifully, but there is another type of braid. This is probably easier to use for someone trying it for the first time. It's what they call a fused braid. The fibres are sort of stuck together so that they don't sort of fray apart when you're fishing. There's been a second sort of revolution in bass fishing as well, and that's the use of topwater plugs, things called sliders and poppers, of which this is one. And this has really, in some circumstances, totally changed our approach to bass fishing. One way to fish these lures is to chug by giving it a little jerk on the rod, let it rest for a while, chug it again, let it rest again, chug it again. And the fish can take at any point from where it lands in the water right back to your feet. One thing you've got to remember when you're using them is if you get a bite, you mustn't strike. Just let it wait until the fish pulls the rod over, and then it'll hook itself, as long as your hooks are nice and sharp. Although I'm fishing in deep water here, so there's no problem with any lure that you wanted to use for bass really. These surface lures have the advantage that you can fish in shallow, weedy, rocky, snaggy, terrible conditions. Even if there's an inch or two of water above the weeds and snags, then a popper or a slider will work well. And believe me, bass will go into those conditions. Well, I'm back on my home ground in Dorset now, and still fishing a popper. The water here is very shallow, the bottom's full of rocks and weed, but there's no problem with these lures. You can, as long as you've got 6 inches of water, you can fish with them, and they hardly ever get snagged up, so in theory one could last you a lifetime. Chuck them out and chug them back. All I need now is a bass. When you've got a little bit of wind behind you like this, these things will go as far as anything really. You can cast them a heck of a long way. And if you're going to get a fish, it's just as likely to take when the lure's lying dead in between chugs. Get quite a big bow in the line with this braid, but it doesn't stop you hooking fish, because once one takes, it'll hook itself. These are three of the most popular surface fishing lures. The chug bug, that's this thing, which looks a bit like a stick of rock with hooks on, I think. It's probably the one that people started using first. It was used in North Wales for catching bass. And it's very effective. It's got a weight inside it that both helps casting, because it slides to the back when you cast, and in theory makes a rattle, a fish attracting rattle. Although, to be honest, I can't find much difference between these three different lures when it comes to catching fish. It's got a dished face, slanted slightly downwards like that, just to make it sort of pop and spit water when you give it a yank on the surface. Slider is much the same sort of design, except that it hasn't quite got such a big dish on the face, and it slopes back more so that it makes less disturbance on the surface. Again, it's got a ball bearing or something inside it that makes it rattle, and it's got a wonderful iridescent fishy looking finish on it. And the third one, a skitter pop, is the one that makes much the biggest disturbance. It's got a plastic dish on the front of it, again slightly sloping downwards, just to give it a sort of a big sort of sploosh as you pull it. Again, when it comes to fish attraction, I can't see the difference between these things, but it casts pretty well. It's got a reasonable amount of weight in it. When these things hit the water, they tend to float. They float on the surface, of course, and they tend to just hang tail down a bit like that. And it's only when you start pulling them that they usually rise up and chug across the surface horizontally. But any of these three will catch bass. They're all very effective, and I use them more or less indiscriminately when I'm fishing for bass over rough ground and in shallow water. It's the right condition for popping this, you know. Nice flat sea. It's one of the few lures that really take well when it's like this. Pop it right over these rocks at the edge here. in now. Hey, got it.
Well done. Oh, that's well hooked, isn't it?
Yeah. Excellent, these poppers.
That's on the skisher pot, was it?
Yeah, stick poppers. Bag getting wet.
That's about what, 3.5?
Yeah.
Lovely.
There she goes. Beautiful.
Well done.
Excellent.
When it comes to bait fishing, another innovation is a circle hook. These things in fact have been used for hundreds of years in the South Seas, where originally they were made of wood, and the point is actually pointing back towards the shank of the hook, and the idea is that it doesn't catch in the guts or the gills of the fish, it only hooks them as it's coming out of the angle of the mouth, and almost invariably the fish are hooked in the jaw or in the edge of the mouth, and because of that, if you don't want them, it's very easy to release them unharmed.
We joined fellow members of Bass Angler Sport Fishing Society on one of their annual visits to Ireland. Plans were laid well in advance, maps studied and tactics discussed. It was then just a matter of travelling across Southern Ireland from the ferry terminal at Rosslare to the Dingle Peninsula.
Well, we come to Inch Strand on the Dingle Peninsula. Inch is probably the most famous of all the surf beaches. They made famous in the 60s with fantastic catches of bass. Suitably kitted out in chest waders, over jacket and a belt to stop the surf from riding up and soaking you thoroughly. A hat to keep the rain off. And of course a suitable surf bass rod. Now this is a rod capable of casting 2 to 4 ounces. It's a fairly light rod, small multiplier, 6,500 is more than suitable. And I'm going to be using anyway, a 2-ounce bomb, although you might go up to a 3-ounce grip lead, breakaway or something like that. A 30-inch trace of 25 or 30 pound mono, and a hook length of 15 pound mono with a 3.0 or 4.0 hook, and a frozen sand eel. You could use live sand eel if you wanted to. Anyway, that's the rig. Let's see if it works. Certainly an effort to even get out to the surf because of the way these tables of water race in across the flat sand. They also race back out again, so you end up pushing yourself forward and then find yourself fighting against the backflow. We've got fairly good conditions at the moment with 4 or 5 tables of surf. And watch this one. Each table is maybe 25 yards wide. It's quite awesome when you see the surf pounding in. I mean, if conditions were rougher than this, I'd probably use a 3 to 4 ounce grip lead. Maybe if there was a little bit more weed about, but the conditions are quite good. It's clear at the moment.
How often have you been to this part of Ireland then, Mike?
Like, this must be about my 6th or 7th trip.
Yeah.
You know, the place is like a magnet to me. I just can't keep away. So
Yeah.
as soon as the autumn comes, I'm starting to get the urge to come.
Well, it's fantastic. I mean, even just the scenery and that, you'd come if even if you weren't fishing, I expect.
Okay, we've got an ammo sand here for bait. It's just come out of a pack that's partly frozen. Now, it won't go down the bend of the hook if it's frozen. The ear will rip. So what I'll do is just defrost it and see if it's quite warm. And this is the value of chest waders. You can really get in your environment, and it's the part of the surface and I really love it. It's not just the fishing, it's mixing it in the suds. It's exhilarating. So we'll just thaw the eel. Give it a good swish around. As soon as you can bring the tail towards the head, you know the eel is thawed enough to put on the hook safely without bursting it. Now what I did previously was to bite the tail off, and that's to stop the eel spinning and gnarling up your trace. The way we do it, get your 5-0 hook, put it in the back of the eel, near to the backbone, and just put it on like you would a lugworm, but not too far down the hook. The eel's nicely bending now. Work the eel down, far enough on now, bring the point hook out of the eel, a little bit of a curve in, and just pull the hook into the eel, and it's straight, looks like that. When the bass comes along, hopefully it's going to take the eel head first. You won't find the point, so you won't be interfered by the hook. It takes the eel like that. Now to secure the eel against the casting forces, we're going to put 2 half hitches round. Now to do this, take a loop, take your line and throw a loop on top of itself, and then pinch it with your finger and thumb, place it over the eel and pass the eye of the hook and pull tight, and that will lock the eel against the shank of the hook. Now one's not enough really, I like to put 2 on. So right over left, make a little loop, whoops, try again, right over left, and then over the eel and past the eye of the hook and snug up tight. Now the nice thing about the 2 half hitches, they're not a knot, so they won't significantly weaken the line. When you come to rebait, you just push on the hook snood, and as you can see, the loops are coming off and your snood's intact. After a period of time it will get a bit gnarled, and it's a good idea after a couple of hours fishing to replace your hook snood. You never know when that big fish is going to come along.
It was decided that a few live sand eels wouldn't go amiss, so a team of crack diggers was dispatched with forks and buckets. Digging for sand eels is a lot like playing a game of cricket. The forker is the batsman and the catchers filled in the slips. They risk a fork through the hand for their efforts. John Morgan opts for the safer pastime of vingling, a method that involves drawing a hook-shaped vingler through the wet sand. Now this isn't without risks, and John wears a glove on his catching hand in case he pulls up a weaver fish, which also bury themselves. John's vingler is made from a ground down carving knife.
Handfuls of sand in the bucket.
The bass members regrouped at Inch for a nighttime sortie. Gathered around the back of Roger Baker's Volvo estate that resembled a well-stocked mobile tackle shop, the banter flowed freely.
The most important thing for the bass angler to consider is how to keep his ciggies dry.
That's correct.
Right. You actually puff away when you're out there, do you?
Right. No, John's.
I don't. I refrain from smoking when I'm fishing. I use rollies. That's why I smoke rollies, so I can't smoke when I'm fishing. But Mike insisted on buying these proper
Your papers get a bit soggy, don't
snobby cigars. Yeah, exactly. You can't roll it because your fingers are wet.
Did you see? You didn't see the hole in the clouds earlier on. The moon was shining on the water like a torch.
last night. Well, we had like an aurora last night. Formed with the moon.
Is that similar to an orgasm, that? Is it?
I don't know. I've had one of them for a long time. Mike.
Mike can't remember.
Are they still frozen, them sand eels?
They're partially thawed at the moment. It's always best to keep them in the cool box.
Yeah.
Okay, put the top back on.
That's nice. Perfect bit of dogfish bait. Fish, Steve, is it?
Don't like the fish. It isn't right off.
Never know. Predicted by me, eh?
You did say.
I'm afraid I did. Never mind. Hope it's lightly hooked, is it? It was.
Lightly enough.
Nice one, Steve. Excellent, mate. Well done. Well, that makes it, doesn't it?
Okay,
Beautifully
okay.
hooked, isn't it? Yeah.
Lovely. Really solid bite as well.
Yeah.
Very difficult to miss. Nonetheless, lovely fish.
Oh, fantastic, Steve.
My first Irish bass.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, you know, excellent fight in the surf.
Yeah.
It really was.
Worth waiting for then.
It was, yeah, very much so.
Fantastic. Yeah.
One happy angler. Well, I'm going to put this one back. Oh, Mike must have a fish.
Let's get down there and see what he's got.
Oh, it's not easy running in all this clobber.
Certainly isn't. Nice fish.
Well done, Mike. Ireland's the place to come if you're looking for peace and solitude. Stunning scenery and conservation measures aimed at protecting the bass always ensure a memorable stay.
I mentioned earlier that it's important to stay dry when fishing the surf. John Morgan is a man who enjoys the outdoor life, and he knows a thing or two about waterproof clothing. However, even John gets it wrong sometimes, and the inevitable rogue wave will find its way in, under or over, and an early bath is par for the course. Recently, John's resorted to the ultimate in protection by investing in a diver's dry suit, earning him the nickname of Captain Black. He doesn't care though, because he goes home as dry as a bone. If you've got access to a small boat, then you can get to many parts of the coast that no one ever fishes. Quiet, shallow bays and the base of sheer cliffs are all within reach and can provide excellent sport. Drifting along, parallel to the shoreline, you can cast your lure into all the nooks and crannies and fish holding areas.
You can cover an awful lot of ground like this, can't you, fishing?
Yeah. It's ground which is seldom covered by other people as well.
Yeah,
This is impossible to shore fish.
yeah. It's not a bad fish, Steve.
It's not a bass though, is it?
No. Oh. That's a good fish though. How about that?
We've tried drifting and casting plugs underneath the cliff here. All we've had is a couple of rats to show for our efforts. So we're going to try a mark now, which is about half a mile offshore. It consists of a ledge and a reef. Right, let's go.
Using the depth finder, it's possible to pinpoint the rocky outcrops and reefs that bass love to hang around.
The critical thing's to get in pretty close to the rocks, really, I think, isn't it? Because the fish are often right up against them.
Really.
Yeah.
Okay, that looks good.
There's a huge rock just under the surface here. Drifting along a fair clip at the moment with this wind blowing.
Yes.
I reckon it is Steve then. Oh, magic. Oh yeah.
That's the first drift.
No, very good.
There we go.
Excellent, well done Steve. Is that on that sliver?
On that part of sliver, yeah.
Beautiful. Oh, it's a bit lively, isn't he? He's
Yeah.
jumped off one hook and out the other nearly there.
It's not fast for a couple of pounds.
Beautiful. Oh, a bit more than that, Steve, I think.
You think?
Yes.
Well, I'll give it 2. Anyway, let's drop her back.
Fantastic.
Right.
Well done.
Well, let's see if we catch another one on the next drift.
That's the object of the exercise, isn't it?
One approach is to adopt stealth tactics, and we use an electric trolling motor. You can just hear it droning away in the background. You can use it to hold station in the current, over the hotspots, or creep up quietly when the main engine would spook every fish for miles around.
Really bloody hammer it along, isn't it?
Plenty of power in it, whatever it is. Oh, nice fish.
Would you like a net?
No, it'll just tangle it.
Alright. There you go, mate.
Nice fish, that.
Nice.
You only fight at the surface and not down in the weeds. Big boulders just in the surface. My son Mark joined us for an evening drifting session, and it wasn't long before he was into a good fish. Right, it's me, I'm Mr. Rast tonight, obviously. Different to the other one, look. Brown and silver, this one. Still capable of inflicting a nasty wound, as the saying goes. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's a sort of £10 bass or a £1/2 rat, it will still stick your hooks in your fingers. Take your time, keep it up there too. Beautiful. Good job, eh? Superb. Not bad fish, Mark.
I don't get it close to the boat now.
Keep winding, you're alright.
Are you watching the shore?
Now swing the rod towards me a bit. My wife would kill me for this.
Well done, Mark.
You're coming up fairly close on the
Yeah.
on the ledge. at the
Okay,
end,
we'll move
Steve.
you, mate.
That's a lovely fish, Mark.
Absolutely super.
That's your first bass in how long?
First in 20 years.
Oh well, welcome back.
Absolutely wonderful.
Great stuff. How big do you reckon it is?
It's a few, isn't it?
It's about, what, £5 maybe?
Yeah, absolutely super.
We'll call it beginner's luck, shall we?
Yeah, that'll do me.
Great.
I think he's a jammy little bugger.
Ten or 12 years ago, when we made the first film, gill nets were the scourge of bass anglers.
I suppose this is every bass angler's nightmare, this, isn't it? Gill net set in a few feet of
In some areas, little seems to have changed, and illegal netting is still rife. If you suspect illegally set nets, ring the Environment Agency hotline on 0800 80 70 60 to report the details.
What you got on there then, Steve?
It's one of those wide-eyed shads.
Oh yeah?
I suppose you call it a rubber fish, really. Can be very effective. The reason they're so effective, I think, is this paddle-like tail on the back and the flexibility of the
Big,
plastic.
isn't it? Yeah.
Well, it vibrates and wiggles like anything. It's a very, very natural action. It's got an integral hook, this one, so you don't actually have to stick the thing on the hook to start off with. The hook is embedded in the manufacturing process. But the really neat trick is that they use a lead weight already attached to the hook itself.
Oh right, so it's quite heavy then.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll break this one open.
Well, that'll do it a lot good.
Pretty bloody tough, but as you can see there, there's a piece of lead
Yeah.
actually moulded to the hook itself.
All right.
And not only that, but it's covered in silvery reflective stuff, so that when it's being retrieved, not only have you got the waggly tail, but you've also got the sort of shimmering effect.
So it shines through that body of the...
That's right, yeah, so it is very fish-like. I suppose it's an adaptation of that method you use, where you stick the lead up the rear end of a red gill.
Yeah, yeah, it's just the same really. Except a lot neater.
Yeah, I think it's important when you're using things like this to use a loop rather than an ordinary knot, because the knot tends to clamp down on the eye of the hook.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see that, just use a little loop knot.
Oh, yeah, it's the better one now.
Oh, that's a nice little fat fish, isn't it? That was on that shad, was it?
It was.
Amazing.
I'll show you.
Yeah, good little lures then. He certainly grabbed hold of that, didn't he?
Well done.
Lovely.
Good shot.
Alan and Mike have been tagging bass as part of a 3-year study on distribution and migration. A small incision is made in the belly of the fish and an individually numbered plastic T-bar tag is inserted. Now this causes the fish no harm whatsoever and it's then released. Should the fish be recaptured, valuable information can be obtained regarding its growth rate and seasonal movements. For up-to-date info, log on to www.ukbass.com or www.cfas.co.uk/bass tagging. One fish was recaptured over 1,000 kilometres away only 2 months after being tagged in Jersey.
There you go.
Fly fishing, eh?
Yeah.
Did you get some on the fly then this morning?
Yeah, yeah. Jeff over there had one and lost another.
Yeah.
He's very good, mine.
To say that Jeff's very good is an understatement. He's probably one of the most experienced saltwater fly rodders in the UK. We asked Jeff to help us make our last film, Fly Fishing with a Pinch of Salt, and in it he gave valuable tips on rods, reels, fly lines and flies suitable for anyone wishing to get into this expanding branch of sea angling. Once you're up to Jeff's standard, which may take some time, a bit of rough weather won't stop you fishing. You can always recognise Jeff by his trademark waste paper basket strapped to his waist.
So the stripping basket, as I say, it's a waste paper bin, but it's a useful item, I guess, is it?
It's useful in many situations when the line that's stripped off gets caught up in weed or on rocks, or even the current could take it away and make casting difficult. It's not too bad here. We could just have the line into the water, and where possible I try not to use it, but in certain situations it would be impossible to fish without it. On a beach where the surf, the surf would just take your line and
sand, I guess, is a real nuisance. You don't want sand on your line, do you?
Not really. No, and then if it goes on the rocks and there's barnacles and you tread on it, and
right.
I think
it's a real handy gadget, that.
It's a handy gadget that's very low tech, as you say.
And I guess if you wanted, you could pay a fortune for one. But
well, you can, and absolutely no need.
What about them glasses, Jeff?
Good, aren't they? Yeah. Oh yeah, these are. The glasses are important in the sense that you only have one pair of eyes, and with flies flying about around your head in bad conditions.
So even you occasionally get a fly in the back of your head?
Oh, yeah, you show me someone who hasn't. I won't believe them. Yes, you get flies stuck in you, and it's very important not to get them stuck in your face. I tend to use at night time either just ordinary safety spectacles or glasses which have a very small tint.
Yeah.
And then as the sun comes up, onto sunglasses, but always wear some form of eye protection.
Are they polarised, them things, or not?
These aren't, because these are really for nighttime fishing or low light, so there's not so much need there, but I do carry the polarised glasses for...
Useful sometimes, isn't it? Having
they are, yes, very useful.
Mike Oliver adopts the SAS approach to safety, preferring a balaclava to avoid his fly ending up as a novelty earring and safety goggles to protect his eyesight. In fact, Mike's fly fishing fashion sense brings a whole new meaning to the expression going commando.
One of the things I don't understand about fly fishing is that you need to strip strike a lot of the time, I think, don't you? That's sort of strike with your hand.
Pull on the line.
What I don't understand is how you get a decent pull, because you know you've got a stretchy line, and you can only, at maximum with your hand you can sort of move the line a couple of feet in a go, can't you?
Well, I think you pull the line, you feel pressure from the fish.
So it has to pull the other way almost, does it?
Well, no, you can, as you pull the line, I mean, it's more difficult with the basket, but you're pulling it like that, and as you're pulling it in, you start to feel a pressure. When you feel a pressure, what you automatically do is clamp the line between those two stripping fingers and lift the rod then. So you've got the line tight, you've got its first pull, and then obviously the sweep of the rod is the same as fishing with plug. You can put the rod under your arm and just strip it in and keep pulling, and you don't need to strike. If you keep pulling, that sets
but
the
the
hook
strike's the sort of instantaneous thing when the fish takes, isn't it? I mean, what you do normally, you know, when I'm spinning, up goes the rod and hopefully you hook the fish, sort of thing.
Well, in effect, if you think about it, if you pull on the line and lift the rod at the same time, you've got a greater amount of line coming in, haven't you?
So it's a bit of both then, really?
Yeah, it's a bit, for here it's a bit of both, yes.
Yeah.
3. It nearly reaches the bottom. 2 loops left, it's good. Well then, leave your rod here for the moment. I will do.
Ta-ra, Steve.
Oh no. I'll see you at the bottom. The rope end's about 10 feet short.
Well, don't drop 10 feet, that's to do you no good at all. Once he's got down there, we can ask him to walk along and look for a better way down for us.
On the end of the rope.
Right, and what's below you? Rocks?
It wouldn't be a very soft landing, put it that way.
You're down?
Possible.
It was worth the perilous descent when I managed to land a lovely little bass on a blue and silver crystal minnow.
Cracking fish, isn't it?
That's a nice fish, isn't it?
Yeah.
Pop it back. Without falling in, hopefully.
But the icing on the cake was when Jeff had a better fish on the fly gear.
Is it a good one?
Is it a bass or is it a pollock? It's probably a bass.
I would have thought so down there.
It's a nice fish.
That's a bass, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a nice fish, isn't it? It's quite a nice little fish.
Yeah, excellent.
That's 4, isn't it?
Good start. Trouble is, I've got Steve on here as well. Excellent.
I told you he was good.